Mamphumzile Mnaboncuka, honorable ministers, deputy ministers, leaders of traditional leadership, representatives from government, civil society, academia, labor, women, youth, persons with disabilities, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you today in this historic session where we are going to be reading the highlights of the final declaration that has been adopted by all of you yesterday in your deliberations. This session will also talk to some of the legacy projects that will live beyond the South Africa's presidency. And those legacy projects will ensure that G20 as a whole does not end on Sunday when the leaders meet and conclude their summit. But this will ensure that the spirit of G20 of the South Africa's presidency remain intact throughout the legacy of our presidency as the first G20 in the African soil. We are running slightly behind time, so I am going to start with the program. And just to give colleagues, comrades, and esteemed guests what would be in the program, I will read out the highlights of the declaration, and we will call up on stage some of our colleagues and comrades that will present some of the projects, the legacy projects which we are referring to. And after which, we will then close the program for the day to prepare for the plenary, which this particular declaration will then be presented to His Excellency President Ramaphosa with his counterparts, as well as submitted or hand over to him for consideration. I also need to make this that the G20 Social Summit was introduced during the Brazilian presidency last year in the history of G20. And the Brazilian presidency provided 9 recommendations to heads of states. Of those 9 recommendations, 6 of them were adopted in the Leaders' Declaration. So, if all goes well, our hope is that a similar approach would be done. We had hoped to produce 12 policy recommendations, and at least half of those would be a great distinct to see them being adapted during the Leaders' Declaration. So you being here, and I know many of you spent over 6 hours yesterday in the policy, in the tracks where you were discussing these policy recommendations and some recommendations. It's not just a tick box exercise. It's something that we take very serious. And as one of the leads of the engagement groups, I can safely say that this process has been opened up to many in the history of G20. After Brazil, South Africa becomes the biggest in terms of including the people, to get the people's voices into the Leaders' Declaration in a coordinated manner where you bring in government, civil society, academia, labor, organized labor, business in one room to have conversion. With that being said, I would like to highlight some of the recommendations which were made. So there were 5 tracks that we had discussed throughout the 2 days that we've met here. And the first track is trade, apologies colleagues, is digital inclusion and equitable transformation. And in this track, I'm going to just read some of the highlights because, again, this was a final declaration which was adopted last evening. I know colleagues, some of you stayed up to about 8, 9 p.m. to finalize this work. And we applaud you for having to stay throughout the evening to ensure that today there is an outcome that we hand over to President Ramaphosa. So under digital inclusion, equitable transformation, one of the policy recommendations is that delegates have called for affordable, equitable access to digital ecosystems. And those actions should create resilience for inclusive systems that empowers and meaningful engagement and opportunities for all. The second one is it has to be human-centered. Rights-based AI data governance frameworks to safeguard the cultural integrity, protect diverse knowledge, and ensure equitable representation of the Global South perspective. Many of you would know that there is some pressure from some of the Global North in terms of this area of interest. So it has to also capture the views and representation of the Global South. We also call for a robust digital safety and cybersecurity measures that will protect those targeted by online harassment and gender-based digital violence while eliminating systemic bias in AI to create fair, inclusive, and secure digital environment for all. But also this requires a multi-stakeholder governance mechanism with active participation of youth, including digital observatory of children, aligned with international standards to safeguard the rights and needs of children and vulnerable groups. So these are some of the highlights that came up from thematic 1, or track 1, which is digital inclusion and equitable transformation. The second track was trade, resilience, and inclusive value chains. This affects a lot of, in fact, everyone, because it talks about inclusive economy, it talks about ecosystems. Now, some of the recommendations in this is we encourage the G20 to expand investment and capacity building initiatives that empowers informal traders to enter formal markets. We also reaffirm that trade is the most transformative when it comes, transformative when it is inclusive, anchored in rule-based global trading systems. Persons with disabilities, youth, SMMEs, informal cross-border traders to participate and benefit fully. But also there is a call to strengthen collaboration with WTO, the World Trade Organization, on anti-dumping enforcement and fair trade practices. There is a need for a pro-development global trade architecture that prioritizes cooperation among the G20 member states to help developing economies build resilient and diverse economies' capability of withstanding external shock, such as pandemics and climate change. I think the third one, colleagues, is also quite important, which is inclusive climate justice, a just transition, and energy democracy. And I want you to highlight the energy democracy component, because we are all, yes, working towards net zero, but it has to be democratic as well. Now, some of the recommendations that are proposed here is to call for an urgent action to eliminate plastic, chemical, and industrial pollution that threatens biodiversity, food sovereignty, and security, human health, and stability. There's also a need for an urgent universal access to affordable, clean energy as a human right by 2030. There's also a need for transition to harness the opportunity from mineral beneficiation and local industrialization for dignified job creation, while offering social protection for workers in fossil-dependent sectors. That's where that part of democracy comes in as well. We are now moving to the next track, which is a just and sustainable finance and international financial architecture. And in this, delegates encouraged the promotion of sustainable value creation and industrialization that strengthens local beneficiation, regional value chains, and technology transfer tied to critical mineral sectors. Delegates call on the G20 member states for a targeted financing for vulnerable groups that develops and promote financing solutions that are inclusive to people in vulnerable situations, including indigenous communities, women, youth, persons with disabilities, migrants, and such measures should enhance equality, accountability, and sustainability for socio-economic transformation. The last track, colleagues, is building momentum for the achievement of the SDGs. And some of the recommendations delegates have proposed. It's a call for strengthening ethical governance and strong accountability systems through mandatory regular national reporting to the UN High-Level Political Forum, supported by structured, transparent, and disaggregated data at subnational, national, regional, and global levels. Civil society participation in evidence-based policymaking. Delegates called for closing the SDG financing gap through innovative partnership, including expanding public-private philanthropic partnerships, strengthening multilateral financing. Those are some of the highlights of the declaration which was adopted by yourselves in the plenary room last night through the work that was coordinated by our dear colleague from W20. Colleagues, we now move on to the reading of the legacy projects. And I would like to call our first speaker, who is going to read out the first legacy projects and announce the legacy projects for the G20 South Africa's presidency. And the speaker is Viwe Mchonchi and N. Gitutu Shongwe, where they will talk about to protect adolescent girls and young women from HIV and socioeconomic vulnerable through layered intervention. I call on Viwe and N. Okay. You will do the reading.
A revitalized adolescent girls and young women HIV prevention empowerment program. Coming out of the G20 Social Summit, I stand here today as Katso Ramudia from Botswana and representing adolescent girls and young women from across Africa, the diaspora, and the global south. I also represent thousands of young women whose lives were transformed through an HIV prevention and empowerment program, women who became empowered, resilient, safe, and AIDS-free or virally suppressed. But when major funders withdrew support early 2025, more than 2 million girls were left without essential services and protection. As of today, when 10 people are newly HIV infected, 7 of them are adolescent girls and young women. But here's the good news. From this year's G20 Social Summit, we have renewed a vision, a regional collaboration dedicated to guaranteeing the future of every African girl and global South girl. We envision an Africa where every young woman is healthy, safe, educated, economically empowered, and AIDS-free. A continent where we prevent the 3,000 new HIV infections that occur every week, where early pregnancies decrease, and where violence no longer destroys girls' dreams. So our strategy starts with rebuilding systems and partnerships. We will strengthen coordination among education, health, youth, and social development sectors. We will engage civil society, faith-based organizations, people living with disabilities, and indigenous structures. We will bring the private sector on board, those who understand that investing in girls is not charity, but a high return investment in economic growth. So over the next 12 months, we will conduct rapid assessment to understand program gaps. We will re-engage previous beneficiaries and youth leaders like myself. We will re-establish governance platforms for coordination and mobilize diverse, sustainable financing, public-private, innovative approaches. We will strengthen monitoring and evaluation and accountability. We will launch a continental level, a revitalized AGYW HIV prevention and empowerment program. So within this program, we will promote digital skills, entrepreneurial, real economic pathways, and roll out new HIV prevention tools, including the PrEP. We will invest in safe spaces, mentorship, and youth-led community initiatives. We will embed today's needs of girls and young women into global and domestic financing reforms. We will conduct and advocate strongly for completion of secondary school for every young girl. By 2030, we aim for at least 50% reduction in HIV infections among adolescent girls and young women. We aim for major reductions in teenage pregnancy and gender-based violence. We aim for increased secondary school completion, expanded access to digital skills, and more women contributing meaningfully to economies. Most importantly, we aim to strengthen Africa's future workforce, ensure greater representation of young African women in governance, and build stronger data-driven accountability systems that track outcomes for young women. And so today, I want you to know this clearly. We young African women are ready to lead. Yes, and I say this as Botswana's future president. Thank you very much. We are not victims. We are holders of powerful vision and for our continent's future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is a very powerful legacy project. And please do keep it up. Y20 will be here to support this process throughout. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to call Namhla Mnigi, who's going to present on the Accelerator for Digitally Enabled MSME Finance and Trade for Women and Youth. I'll give a round of applause, colleagues. Thank you.
I understand because the future president of Botswana just finished speaking. There's no competing, so it's okay. It really is okay. Warm greetings, colleagues. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'll stand on the existing protocols, presenting on the outcomes of our legacy project side event that was titled Unlocking the Future of Finance and Trade for MSMEs. On November 19th, 2025, we, the partners, launched the G20 Legacy Project on Financial Inclusion for Women and Youth. The Accelerator for Digitally Enabled Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprises, Finance and Trade for Women and Youth, called ADEM in short, met to confirm that financial inclusion is crucial for economic transformation, equality, and sustainable development. Given that money is not in short supply around the world, Financial services should be available to every young person, every woman, whether in rural areas, in townships, or in the cities. Therefore, we aim to enable 100 million women and youth-owned micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises by 2030, with gender-responsive and youth-centric financial services, responsible digital cross-border payments, inclusive trade systems. Recognizing that access to finance creates impact only when it is user-focused, with proper infrastructure, with capabilities and market access, we are committed to comprehensive funding value chains that start with pre-investment support and include post-investment support. Ladies and gentlemen, we truly believe that a future-ready Africa must build women's and young people's skills, integrating entrepreneurship, digital skills, and financial literacy into every national education systems, not just in Africa, but the world over. The South African presidency, collaborating with its partners, G20 Empower Alliance, W20 and Y20, as well as the Better Than Cash Alliance, we will encourage G20 members, banks, financial institutions, and philanthropic organizations to commit tangible actions and new resources to this work that we will do. Now, we already have mobilized commitments to achieve the 100 million. For instance, the South African government, through its Department of Small Business Development, has committed yesterday to integrating 1 million new micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises into digital financial and trade ecosystems. Equity Bank Group, which is one of the largest banks across Africa, has committed to empower 100 million new Africans across 15 countries, enabling digital payments, credit, and cross-border market access. The AfCFTA, which is the Free Continental Agreement Secretariat, has committed to using the 2 billion partnership it has with the African Development Bank and Afri-Exim Bank to accelerate its work with micro and small and medium-sized enterprises to access finance, trade logistics, digital infrastructure. These African commitments, and I hope it's clear that these are African entities that have already made these tangible commitments. But these African commitments are supported by global efforts. Our partner, the Better Than Cash Alliance, aims to support 100 million MSMEs worldwide to adopt the use of responsible digital payments by 2030, and the UNDP network globally will provide the scaling, policy alignment, and technical assistance needed. I hope you also hear that this particular action-oriented initiative is aligned with Track 1, Track 2, as well as Track 5. Together, these commitments create a unified global path to accelerate digitally driven, gender-sensitive, youth-centric financial inclusion and trade for us all. Thank you very much.
Last round of applause, colleagues. We're talking about millions of young people and women here that there's already commitments. Thank you so much, Namsha. I'm now going to call on Evan Jacobs, who's going to talk on the Timbuktu UNDP. Is Evan here? No? Okay. Okay. There's Evan Jacobs on my program. Please give her a round of applause. Ahuna. Just introduce yourself.
Your Excellency, Madam Future President of Botswana. Dear friends of the global community, as United Nations Assistant Secretary General, and director of UNDP's Regional Bureau for Africa, here's what keeps me up at night. We have millions of unemployed youth on our continent. We have millions of ideas and potential entrepreneurs who just need a chance to succeed. For those who have tried to go into business, you will know how hard this is. Africa has nearly 30,000 active startups, entrepreneurs. We receive less than 1% of global venture capital. In that 1%, young women building businesses receive just about 5% of the 1%. But here's what gets me out of bed every morning. An initiative called Timbuktu, powered by UNDP, which says the time to look for jobs that are non-existent is over. It is time for African youth to be enabled to create jobs. We are given the chance for a student in Malawi designing clean energy solutions for rural communities. A fashion tech innovator at the University of Johannesburg addressing gender-based violence through technology. We're supporting a fintech founder in Lagos who is connecting farmers to markets through mobile money to start a business that will not only survive, but create opportunities for others. Degrees or not, you can succeed through Timbuktu. You're not succeeding for self, you're succeeding for communities. Our young people, ladies and gentlemen, are solving for the poor and disadvantaged. Africa's young people are not waiting for permission to build the future. The question is, will our systems finally rise to meet their ambition? That's why we built Timbuktu. Timbuktu connects 4 critical pieces that have either been missing or existed separately. The first, through our university innovation centers, which give students spaces to further their ideas into products for the markets. We have launched in 15 countries across Africa, including here in South Africa, the University of Johannesburg, and we commit to install these innovation centers in every African country. Second, we have created Pan-African thematic hubs, such as FinTech in Lagos, Green Tech in Nairobi, Creatives Hub here in South Africa in Cape Town. For the Creatives Hub, we had 400 applications from 30 countries before we even opened the doors. And I can tell you, last night, my heart warmed when Kind Arts, a multidisciplinary artist and filmmaker who is part of our program, told us that her profit rose by 43% after she received support from this program. The third is fixing the rules that block young people. Timbuktu works with governments and policymakers to make the laws and paperwork easier so that good ideas don't die in broken regulatory systems. If we get this right, ladies and gentlemen, we will impact more than 100 million livelihoods. The fourth is channeling catalytic capital, money for early stage risk capital businesses. Different partners are putting money together in a fund to help startups. And we're targeting, our ambition is to raise at least $1 billion in early stage catalytic fund. UNDP and its partners, including governments, by the way, have already dispersed over $40 million into this space just in the first year of execution. This is why South Africa has recognized Timbuktu as a G20 legacy project, because it's designed to outlast presidencies and budget cycles. It's embedded in universities, anchored by investors, strengthened through policy reform, sustained by a dedicated foundation. It's built to scale. The ambition is to support 10,000 enterprises, scale 1,000 of them to become gazelles and unicorns across borders in Africa and impact 100 million lives. But to reach that ambition, we need the G20 muscle. We need governments, philanthropies, we need DFIs, IFIs, and we need private sector to invest, not just as donors, but as partners in building new markets. Because when you invest in Timbuktu, you are backing the next generation of companies that will shape African economies and global industries. Then this presidency will be remembered not for the promises made, but for what was built. A continental pathway that turned African ingenuity into economic transformation. The opportunity is here, ladies and gentlemen. The talent in Africa is ready. So let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As you may have seen, everyone that has come here is women. I think the G20 Social Summit Secretariat has done well. And most of the programs that are alluded here really speaks to women and youth. And those are not just the future, but also the present. Ladies and gentlemen, let me call the next speaker, and I call upon Amohelang Mashele to talk about the Global Leadership Network, Partnership for Prosperity, a public-private partnership health accelerator. Over to you.
Co-conveners, excellencies and distinguished guests, friends in civil societies, but most importantly, women, children, and adolescents all over the world. Good day. My name is Amohelang Mashele, the first female president of the Nelson Mandela Children's Parliament, representing millions of children across South Africa. As a young leader, I feel sad when I see the state of children and adolescents' health today. As I grow up to be a young woman, I worry that mental health remains one of the biggest challenges for adolescents, and access to essential health services, including sexual and reproductive health and rights, is limited or even denied. Adding to these problems is the devastating withdrawals in official development assistance, which have left too many community organizations that protect women's, children's, and adolescents' health and rights without money. Some have closed down, and many are unable to do the good work that they were doing. Health is a human right. We want world leaders, and all of us here, to address these issues if we are going to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals and the 2063 Agenda, the Africa we want. It is for this reason that I stand here as the first female president of the Nelson Mandela Children's Parliament, representing several constituencies such as the Children 20, Youth 20, Women's 20, and Children's sector to echo our endorsement of the Global Leaders Network for Women, Children's and Adolescents' Health, chaired by President Ramaphosa, and we call on the Global Leaders Network and advance its critical work towards the elimination of maternal mortality, neonatal mortality, and adolescent mortality. We welcome the renewed commitment of the Global Leaders Network on the margins of the 18th United Nations General Assembly, in particular, the commitment of the Global Leaders Network and the African Leaders Malaria Alliance, chaired by President Duma Gideon Boko of Botswana, to collaborate and establish a global health gap financing mechanism where women, children, and adolescents will be the main beneficiaries. The GAP financing mechanism will be a gift to the world from the Global South. It will draw from $1 trillion in diaspora remittance as well as from the private sector. Community health workers, civilians, sexual reproductive health, health rights, and elimination of AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis will be the main focus of the fund. It will be housed in a financial institution in the Global South. We congratulate the Global Leaders Network and the African Leaders Malaria Alliance on this visionary step and declare this as a legacy project of the G20 Social Summit that must be implemented with extreme urgency. We call on G20 development partners, the private sector, and the global diaspora to champion and support Global Leaders Network and African Leaders Malaria Alliance as they catalyze equitable health financing and resilience. And to all children present in the world, I say Happy World Children's Day. I thank you. Ke a leboga. Thank you. Siyabonga.
Thank you so much, Amohelang. Yet again, another woman, and not just a woman, but a child, a young woman who is the present, not just the future. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to move ahead. I'm going to call on Buitumelo Musako, who's going to talk about the DBSA, CEO DBSA DLAB program, empower youth and communities through inclusive, sustainable, social infrastructure and opportunity pathways. Buitumelo.
Good morning. I am not Buitumelo. She's yet to come to the stage. My name is Lebogang Seperepere. Let me say, as Africa, we are wealthy. We have seen the young women that are here. So we are there. Sports for development through the development laboratories. As a South African contribution to the G20 Summit legacy, we wish to leverage the Development Bank of South Africa's DLABS program, which embodies the commitment to inclusive and sustainable development in the continent. This initiative delivers social infrastructure, being the community hubs that serve as a foundation for economic activity, growing and funding entrepreneurs, and creation of job opportunities for women and youth in the underserved areas. We commit to developing and financing community-based infrastructure and enhanced delivery programs that enables more communities across the sub-Saharan Africa to access the sport, income generation and economic development opportunities. This will be enabled through joining the SESLA, being Sports for Education and Sustainable Livelihoods in Africa initiative, and enhancing our strategic collaboration with our International Olympic Committee, the French Development Bank, the Lloris for Sports, Olymp Africa International Foundation, as well as Financing Common Sports Coalition. We will build the capacity of African civil society organizations to measure and understand the positive developmental impact of the integrated community through sports and economic development. And we will also develop economic infrastructure and associated programs with the first cohort that has already been trained during this G20 Social Summit, and ongoing training development initiatives leading to the 2026 Dakar Youth Olympic Games, the first ever Olympic event that is held on the African soil. Through these sustainable development initiatives, we seek to reinforce the voice of Africa and contribute meaningfully to the G20's shared legacy for sustainability, equality, and shared prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lebohang. Again, a good last round of applause, colleagues. I didn't feel that one. The last speaker on our program for legacy projects is David Makura, who's going to talk about UNDP, USF, and DBSA, Pan-African Sovereignty Wealth Funds Initiative, establishing a regional sovereign wealth funds to stabilize economies, invest in sustainable development. David Makura. Another change. A round of applause, please.
Good morning. Dumelang. Le kae? Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bitumelo Mosako, and I serve as the Chief Executive Officer for the Development Bank of Southern Africa. I'm going to be talking about Mula Chelete. Africa needs about $1.3 trillion every year to meet the pressing needs of its citizens. Just to build and maintain infrastructure like roads, bridges, dams, supply energy, Africa needs to spend about $181 to $221 billion every year. Given Africa's rising youth population, nearly 420 million youth aged between 15 and 35 years, 1/3 are unemployed and discouraged, which undermines Africa's human capital potential. Africa is also faced with high debt levels, which have reached over $1 trillion and continue to rise, which places a bottleneck on Africa's development. Even though Africa has the second largest population by continent, and many of the world's most important natural resources come from Africa, it only produces 2% of global manufacturing output. This has to change, and the time for change is now. The proposed Pan-African Sovereign Wealth Fund offers a solution that can address some of the funding gaps that are delaying Africa's self-realization through its young population. Our young people, our advantage on this continent. This Pan-African Sovereign Wealth Fund will not replace other sovereign wealth funds that have already been developed by African countries or ones that are in process of development. It will also not replace other financing mechanisms, but will work alongside them to create a bigger pool of funding under African unity and solidarity. By mobilizing resources through the continent and spending the money on different important initiatives for each African country, the fund can attract new investments and provide long-term stability. It can enable the desired future of Africa's youth by investing in infrastructure for access to endless opportunities for our youth. It can change the future of Africa's youth by reducing the burden of future debt that every African child is burdened with. This means we will use our own African funding resources to provide, for example, reliable energy to roughly 600 million Africans that currently do not have access to reliable energy, fund and build our own roads, fund the provision of clean water to drink, provide reliable internet access for all in order to even boost entrepreneurship, especially for the youth through the digital economy, create new industries and future-fit meaningful jobs for our young women and young men. This fund will be managed by a robust governance framework anchored in civil society, public accountability, and affiliated with the African Union, African Development Finance Institutions, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, Agenda 2063, the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD. The DBSA, Open Society Foundation, and UDNP are committed to continue to bring together all stakeholders to further develop the important initiatives. African leaders and civil society must take this bold action and drive this agenda to deliver the future we want. Ladies and gentlemen, African Capital for Africa's Development. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yet again, I was told that there is another legacy project to be presented. I'm going to call on Dr. Keshen Pillay and Wayne Sharp that will talk about the expanding access to higher education through digital technology.
Greetings to all at the People's G20. We stand on all protocol observed, and we also want to acknowledge the future president of Botswana and the president of the Children's Parliament, the Nelson Mandela Children's Parliament. The University of Johannesburg and Council's legacy project expanding access to higher education in Africa through digital technology recognizes that 60% of Africa's population is under 25. Yet only 9% of our people have access to tertiary education. Using the G20 host nation as an example, South Africa alone has 815,000 school leavers, competing for just 250,000 university places. Building enough universities to meet this demand will take too long, and it will be too expensive, and our children cannot wait, and Africa's future cannot be delayed. This is why we stand firmly on the commitments made by the B20, Y20, and S20. Not on our watch will Africa be left behind. Through the Global Goals 2030 Africa Scholarship, powered by partnerships with tertiary institutions across the global north and the global south, we have already opened the doors for more than 2,000 African students at a sponsorship in excess of 235 million rands just for cohort 1. This initiative gave our students world-class online education that they would never have been able to access, narrowing the divide that held this great continent back. We want to ensure that our educators are not left behind too. Therefore, we are committed to upskilling them to leverage technology so that they can shape the young minds of Africa. We do this deliberately to capacitate African institutions of learning by building its most valuable resources, its people. This is how we prepare for 2050, when over a quarter of the world's workforce will come from Africa. We will ensure that education not only creates employment, but builds African entrepreneurs who create jobs for its people.
The G20 Social has reminded us of 4 urgent challenges: widening access and affordability, transforming curricula to affect African-centric values, integrating digital and AI technologies at scale, and strengthening employer partnerships to ensure our graduates are prepared for jobs of the future. In the next 2 years, we will launch the African Digital Higher Education Consortium, negotiate zero-rated educational data with telecom providers, pilot micro-credentials and AI literacy programs, and embed African knowledge systems into inclusive curriculum frameworks. Over the next 3 to 5 years, we will scale blended and online learning models, harmonize micro-credential frameworks across borders, expand renewable energy infrastructure to stabilize digital learning, and establish strong AI ethics and governance standards in our higher education systems. Over the next decade, we will aim for nothing less than transformative change, to move Africa from 9% tertiary enrollment towards global parity, to position our continent as a leader in inclusive, digitally enabled education and ecosystems, to ensure that higher education becomes a catalyst for innovation-led growth and lasting social stability, all fully aligned with Agenda 2063 and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Today, the Financial and International Business Association of the United States, a Global North partner, together with the Graduate Institute of Financial Sciences, the University of Johannesburg, and all other Global South partners, affirm our commitment to power digital learning, to expand financing models, and support education that unlocks opportunity across borders. Together, we can build an education ecosystem worthy of an Africa we all want and deserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, dignitaries, this was the last presentation. We are now at the end of the program. As I've said, we were running behind schedule. So from here on, we've been requested to move to the plenary where we're going to then do the closing. With the powers vested in me by the core